Shanghai GDG is a very interesting developer community.
I'm glad somebody has asked this question.
This is where the magic happens.
This is primarily a question and answer show. So if any of you out there would like to ask questions.
Hey guys, welcome back to Google Developers Live. I'm Vic. I work on the Google Drive SDK team. Today what I'm going to be doing is walking through the quick start sample for the Drive SDK and Ruby. So today I'm going to show you how to write a command line application that will upload a file to Google Drive. So this is pretty straightforward. The entire tutorial takes 5 minutes or less to really run through yourself. There's just a few key steps that we have to do. So here on my screen I've got the Google Drive SDK documentation open, specifically our quick start guide. And there's a lot of text here, but the primary points are that you need to enable the Drive API for a Google API console project that pretty much lets your application just access the Drive API. You need to install the Google Ruby client library, set up the sample, and run the sample. So let's just dive in. The first thing is open the Google API console and then create a new project. So I'm going to create one here. I'm going to call this Google Developers Live and create project. This just takes a second to create the new project. And here it is. So you'll notice that most of the services are off. What we have to do is enable the Drive API. Click this. And then that's it for that section. The other thing that we have to do in the API console is create an OAuth2 client ID. And what this is going to do is allow our command line application to actually make requests to the API that have been authorized by a user. So I'm going to create the client ID. Again, I'm going to call it Google Developers Live. And then I'm going to click Next. And so this is important. We're not writing a web application. We're writing an installed application. So this is an application that doesn't run in a web browser. So let's select this. And then it's not an Android or iOS application. It's Other. And then I'm going to create the client ID. All right, so here it is. This is our client ID, and this is our client secret. We're going to need these in just a minute. Coming back to the documentation, the next thing that we have to do is install the Google API client library for Ruby. So this is pretty much just a Ruby gem. I'm going to come here and paste it. I've actually already got it installed, and I need super user permissions to install it and stuff. So I'm not going to run that command, but just trust me that I've run it. And once that's installed, we need to set up the sample. So under Ruby here, the only thing that we need to do is copy and paste this source code into quickstart.rb, which is the name of the file that we're going to run. So I've got that here locally. You can see this is the exact same. And then the next thing that we have to do is replace these templates with actual client ID, an actual client ID and secret. So these are in the API console for the installed application. So let me select this one, and there's the client ID, and then let me replace this one with the client secret. And that's it. So I'm going to save it, and then we'll run it. And after we run it once, we're going to walk through the source code. So to run it, this is also in the documentation. We just come down a little bit further, and you can see all you have to do is run ruby quickstart.rb. So paste that. Oh, whoops. Before I forget, let me also go into the fact that we're going to upload a file, so we need a file to upload. I actually have one here called document.txt. It says hello world inside, nothing fancy. So again, let me run the quick start. Okay, so you see some warnings up here, just ignore those. Those are because my Ruby installation is a little messed up, but no big deal, it's still functioning fine. So here, what we need to do is paste this URL into our web browser. So I come here and I paste. So here we see the OAuth2 authorization page for our API project, Google Developers Live, and it's asking me to view and manage the files and documents in Google Drive. If a user is curious, they can expand this and see what else is going on. So I'm going to click Allow Access. And because this is for an installed application, what it's going to do is give me an authorization code that I have to take from this text box and paste back to the application. So once I paste that here and hit Enter, that's it. So here we have the document ID for our file, and then the title. These were returned from the Drive SDK back to the Ruby client library, and then we printed them out in our application. So let's take a look at Google Drive, and I'll show you that actually worked. So here I'm searching for my document, which is the name of the document we uploaded, and there's nothing. But if I refresh, here it is. So I click on this and give it a second. It says hello world. So that's the content of our text file. So we know that it works. Let's just now take a look through the source code and see what's going on. So if I vim quickstart.rb. So at the top here, we're just importing some libraries and then setting some constants here, primarily the client ID and secret, and then the OAuth scope that we're going to request. Here we request the full Drive scope. So this allows us to pretty much access any part of the Drive API. There are other scopes that are probably more appropriate, but because hypothetically this application might in the future download files or something like that, or work with a user's entire Drive corpus, we request the full scope. And then also we need the redirect URI, which is currently set to out of band, which is why we had to copy and paste that authorization code. Then we create a new API client and load the Drive API, pretty straightforward. We request authorization, so we set up some parameters here, and then we get the URI from client.authorization.authorization URI. We print that to the screen. This is the thing that the user will copy and paste into their web browser. And once they paste it, we're going to request that they enter the authorization code, and client.authorization.code equals what they gave, and then we're going to fetch the access token. Pretty straightforward. The last thing that we have to do is actually just insert the file. So here we're creating the new file with this metadata. So here's the title and the description and the MIME type. And then here's the media content that we're going to attach to that metadata. So document.txt, and we're saying that its type is text plain. And here's the result. Here's where we actually upload this file to Google Drive. We're just doing client.execute, and we're doing drive.files.insert, and we're attaching some extra parameters here. Once we do that, result contains a JSON object or a JSON representation of the API response, and result.data.whatever is going to have metadata about the individual file that we uploaded. So result.data.id is the ID of the file, and title is the title of the file. There's other stuff in here that's not too important at the moment. So that's pretty much it for the application. So once we've got that done, we can actually improve the sample quite a bit. We could do some other things, primarily this stuff, like copying and pasting this URL into the browser, then clicking allow access, then copying and pasting the authorization code back into the application. That's just tedious, right, for the user. So there are a couple of ways around that. What we want to do usually is open the web browser for the user, firstly, so that they land on the authorization page without having to copy and paste the URL. The other thing we usually want to do is spin up a web server locally on the user's computer, just for a few minutes while the user browses to the authorization URL. And then what we can do is set a redirect URI, so that when Google receives the allow access click, from the user, Google will redirect the user's browser back to localhost. And once they do that, you can land here on your own web browser and get the URI of the request, which has the authorization code in it. And with that authorization code, you can use that to then upgrade to a request and an access token. So that's a much better user experience, where the user doesn't have to copy and paste some stuff that they might not necessarily understand. Some other stuff that you could do is make this application work for more file types besides text files. So at the moment, if we come back to quickstart.rb, you can see here that we manually set the MIME type, but you could do some more intelligent determination of what the MIME type of a file is before uploading it. Another thing we could do is extend just the general functionality of this command line sample. We could do things like allow the user to download a file with a command line sample, or we could do things like cache the refresh and access tokens into a secure data store locally on the user's computer. So in Linux you might use the key store, for instance. So those are just a couple of things that we could do. If you're really looking more towards writing a web app that integrates with the Google Drive user interface, then I highly recommend you take a look at our other samples, which are back here in the documentation under example apps. So here we have a full set of example apps. So here's the Ruby one. For writing an example application called Dr. Edit, which is a text editor for the web. And that's very much more advanced in that it allows you to integrate your application into the Google Drive user interface so that a user can interact with individual files using your application. And it does a few more advanced things that just take a little bit longer to get started, certainly more than 5 minutes. So that would be a good next step. That's pretty much it, though. So this has been the Google Drive SDK Quick Start for Ruby. I'm Vic. Thanks for watching.